Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio, broadcast from the Philadelphia law offices of Obermeyer. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts, Drew Hanlon, Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, Bob Carullo, Sabre Systems, Ethan Milrod, GoTo, David DiStefano, Exude, and Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning. Ethan, can you give us a rundown on who we have on the air today, please?
Sure, Herb. First, we'd like to thank Matthew Shapiro and everybody here at the law offices of Obermeyer for hosting us today. We have a great show, including Mike Harle, President of Gaudenzia, Kevin Crichton, President eMortgage Management, David Waxman, Co-founder and Managing Partner, MMPartners, and Catsy Pemberton, Executive Director of Peter's Place.
Let's get to know our first guest, Mike Harle, President of Gaudenzia. Mike, what is Gaudenzia? What are you guys doing?
Gaudenzia is a private, not-for-profit organization serving about 18,000 people a year in 4 states and about 180 different programs.
Wow. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Northeast Philadelphia.
A row house, right?
Yes.
How many brothers and sisters?
None. I'm an only child.
Okay. And how young were you when you started making money?
8 or 9 years old, I would go to the Penn Fruit and push carts to...
So you've been working your whole life, you told us earlier, in the green room. And you also mentioned that you had a rocky childhood. What are you talking about?
Yes. My mother was diagnosed with adult onset of schizophrenia when I was about 8. She was a very competent woman, beautiful woman, but professional singer. But slowly but surely she ended up institutionalized by the time I was 9.
Drew?
Mike, did you feel hopeless at that time?
Being a 9-year-old, I don't know. I didn't know what hopelessness was. You adapt to your environment.
And who stepped in for you and sort of guided you?
My grandmother, number one. All my grandparents.
And can you tell us a little about your grandma?
My grandmom was 4'10", and she cleaned houses, and she was a very religious woman, but a very loving woman, but not demonstrative.
And when you go to work every day, what do you hear your grandmom telling you?
Do the right thing.
David?
Mike, where did you live at the time?
I lived in the Frankfurt section of Philadelphia.
And who did you live with?
I lived with my mother, because my mother and father, because of
you mentioned you live with a lot of people, though. What do you mean by that?
I lived with a lot of people. I lived with my aunts, my uncles,
How come?
my godparents.
Why?
I had my family was pretty much destroyed. My parents were separated, and my mother...
what did that period of your life have to do with this period of your life?
Well, it led me into addiction at an early age, and drug use, and then later on addiction. And
so you didn't really have a home. I mean, you bounced around a lot. You had some people that. What do you? Isn't that what you do? Aren't you giving what you needed?
Yeah, I understand this from the bottom of my heart.
What are you talking about? What do you understand from the bottom of your heart?
I understand that people have either not had a family or had a family that was destroyed. They lost their relationships, and without family, without connections, most people in addiction never recover.
Is that what you're doing at Gaudenzia?
Yes.
Is that the real heart of what you're doing at Gaudenzia?
That is our model of.
What is your model?
Our model is what's called a therapeutic community, which is, matter of fact, every morning everybody calls each other family, brothers and sisters, and family members. That's how we approach it.
And that's what you needed, and that's what you realized Gaudenzia is about. Ethan?
Mike, can you share with us and paint a picture of what the neighborhood was like that you grew up in and what impact that had on you?
It was not a bit, I'm a little older. The neighborhood's not that good now, but at the time, it was a pretty good neighborhood. Police and firemen that worked for the city would live in that neighborhood. A lot of plumbers, electricians. My uncles were plumbers and electricians, and so tradesmen and working class folks.
And what impact did the neighborhood have on you?
Oh, very
as
positive.
You grew up?
A very positive impact, because actually a couple times I actually lived for a short period of time with neighbors.
Wow, you really did bounce around. Robert?
How did post-World War II impact you?
My neighborhood had a large number of vets from World War II, and so we grew up around that. There was no real discussion about it. I probably because of post-traumatic stress disorder. But everybody knew that these folks did their duty. And a good example of that would be when the Vietnam War broke out. Most of the people in my neighborhood volunteered.
Mm-hmm. Right. Matthew?
Mike, you told us before about an uncle who helped step in when you were younger. Could you tell us about him?
My uncle Henry, who had 8 kids, by the way, took me in. I was one of the Army, so I'm an only child that never spent a lot of time alone. so I never seen myself as being special, I can tell you that. And my Uncle Henry was a role model to me. He was a good man. He was a World War II vet himself. He pulled himself up, got a degree in engineering, and became the head of sales for General Electric on
What
East
do you
Coast.
bring to work every day that you got from your uncle?
Again, it's to do the right thing, the values of hard work, rolling up your sleeves.
Frank, what are you thinking?
Well, Mike, I'm wondering, do you see yourself, and how do you see yourself in those you serve?
Well, my job is to and I think I'll say it, I'm not the brightest light in the chandelier. I'm not stupid, but I'm not very bright. But I am committed to what I do, and I bring heart to what we do, and a leadership.
Did you have your own therapeutic community? When you
absolutely. Without it, I wouldn't be here sitting.
What was it? Talk about that.
It was people like me helping me, and that came before me, my peers that had, in some cases, more difficult lives than me, who showed me the way.
And talk about the impact you have on those you serve.
I think I'm a role model to the folks, but now my real role model job is I have 1,200 employees. So my real job is to making sure we have no CAT scan machine for our kind of industry. The CAT scan machine is these people, and these people are important. So me transferring the values and skills that they need to do their job and providing a role model for them, probably the way to go.
Shannon?
Mike, when you were addicted at 12, who helped you get through that period and who helped you get out of it?
Probably the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Court of Common Pleas helped me out of it. That was my higher power to say. Basically, they said either you are at 20 years old, either you get treatment for yourself or you go to the penitentiary. So,
Mike, if you were giving advice to a kid, maybe 12 to 15, that was suffering a little bit, what would the advice be?
Ooh. I'd want to talk to their parents, that's for sure, because 12 to that age, it's hard to have a discussion with them. But I would.
What'd you tell their parents?
I tell them that you have a child that has real difficulties, and if you don't get your life together, it's going to make it difficult for them to get their life together.
David?
So, Mike, as the president, aren't you sitting in your office, thinking about the organization more so than the people you serve?
I can't forget. Everything I think about has to do with the people I serve. And I'm not sitting in my office either. I'm hardly there.
I didn't think so. You talked about hope, right? So how do you actually spread the hope person to person?
Yeah, addiction is a disease of hopelessness and disconnection from everything. And you have to constantly remind your staff that what they're seeing right now may look hopeless, but it's not. So you really need to. And what we do is we have a graduation every year. I make them go to it, and I make them see people. Because if you're only working there 9 months, you don't get to see much good. You know what I mean? So I've been able to see the worst in mankind, and the people much stronger than I am.
What percentage of your staff were former patients?
About 50 to 60%. 60% of them.
So the staff really appreciates how they're helping.
Right.
These are not people that don't care. These are people that implicitly understand and care.
With the salaries they make, there wouldn't be any other way to do it. So
the Gaudenzia team is really a team that's there for the right reasons.
Everybody's important. The person who takes out everybody, you can't. Our house the driver has more impact on the clients sometimes than the counselors.
Does it feel like work to you?
No.
Why?
No, it's who I am. It's what I do.
What do you mean it's who you are?
It's who I am. I believe in what I do, and I need to do it, and I want to do it, and I get.
Why do you need?
I'd volunteer.
Why? Wait. Why would you volunteer?
Because it's two things. One is it's something I need to do for myself, and I need to give back. I have gratitude for what was given to me, and I have to give it back to other people.
What's the website address of Gaudenzia?
Excuse me?
The website address? Your website?
It's Gaudenzia.org.
We've been speaking with Mike Harle, president of Gaudenzia, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment, right after this break. Want help building your business with help from this show's CEOs? Our CEOs can help you uncover more opportunities, grow your sales, connect you, help you raise money, all the big issues, because our CEOs have been there and done that. They've succeeded in creating millions of jobs and earning millions of dollars, and some are available to advise you. Now, email mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. That's mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. The same CEOs you've heard on the show for 10 years may be willing to help you build your business, uncover new opportunities, grow your sales, connect you, help you raise money, all the big issues, because our CEOs have been there and done that, succeeding in creating millions of jobs and earning millions of dollars. And some are available to advise you. Now, email mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. That's mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Kevin Crichton, president of eMortgage Management. Kevin, what is eMortgage Management?
We're a residential mortgage finance company.
How large or how small are you guys?
We have 300 people who work at the company, and we do approximately $2 billion worth of loans per year.
When you started with the company, what kind of revenue was it doing?
Total loans were about $500 million and about 100 people.
Mm-hmm. So you were doing a quarter of what you're doing now, from 500 to 2 billion.
Correct.
So where are you from originally?
Born in Brooklyn, raised in the city, and lived in central New Jersey for most of my...
Why'd you move to central New Jersey?
My father wanted to get us out of the city.
Why?
It was his dream to leave a 3-bedroom brownstone in Brooklyn where he had 8 children growing up to have some room for his own children and his family. So that was his dream, to get out of the city.
Mm-hmm. And how young were you when you started working?
Probably had chores my whole life, but my actual working career was probably at the age of 12.
What were you doing starting at the age of 12?
Typical paper route, working in pizzerias, bagel stores.
Mm-hmm. What'd you do different than all the other kids that did those jobs?
I was always working either in a job or chores or sports or cleaning up my room or something, but I was never, ever resting.
So you take things seriously.
They would say that. My friends, yeah.
So what's that have to do with taking a business from $500 million to $2 billion?
It's a very serious process with a lot of balance, and I feel responsible for every employee I have to make sure they have a job to come to tomorrow.
Wait. That's not what I was expecting to hear. Give me that again.
Growing a company is not necessarily hard to do, but the responsibilities around it and the people who work for you or work with you, I want to make sure they have somewhere to come tomorrow. So it's on me to make sure it's safe and sound as we grow it.
Okie dokie. Drew.
Kevin, you mentioned in the green room that being a good son at a young age was important to you. What did you mean by that?
Honoring my mother and father, doing the things they wanted me to do, doing my chores, coming home from school, running home when I was told when dinner was on the table.
And did your mom and dad show you when you were doing a good job?
Not necessarily, other than to maybe not get a boot up my butt or something for my phone.
And do you bring that lesson you learned to work with you, and that do you show your employees when they're doing a good job?
I do, but probably not enough, admittedly.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Kevin, how young were you when you moved from the city out to New Jersey?
7.
7, and you said it was your father's dream to do that, right?
It was.
Did he tell you? Did he tell the whole family, this is my dream family, I want to move out here?
He did. He was a big family man, too, so he didn't want to upset his family, but he knew he wanted to get out and have his children, his wife, and have a better life than he did.
And how does that relate to who you are today?
I'm the same way every day with my family. I do everything for my wife and my children and my friends and the employees that work with me.
Frank?
Kevin, you mentioned when you were 17, something happened that impacted you. What was that?
My father died suddenly. There was no history. I woke up one day. I was at high school, got called home, and he had passed away.
And how does that shift your role in your family?
Accelerated my maturity, or my maturation, if you will, and my responsibilities for my family, my mom, my sister,
What do
my
you mean?
friends.
What are you talking about?
It was so sudden that there was no planning, there was no organization, there was no money.
So
put
what
aside.
role did you take on?
The patriarch.
You took on your father's role.
I did.
What's that have to do with the business success, taking a business from $500 million to $2 billion?
I play the same role at the business today. I am that leader, that person that they rely on to make sure we're making the right moves, to do the right thing by
Just wanted
employees.
to make sure I understood, Shannon.
Kevin, earlier when you were talking about your 2 granddaughters, your whole face lit up. What have they taught you that has made you a better president at eMortgage Management?
I never thought I could be happier than having 3 beautiful children than when I had 2 beautiful grandchildren. So life gets better, I think, as you go along, and pay it forward, I believe. And God has bestowed on me 2 beautiful grandchildren.
Ethan?
Kevin, from your chores at a young age to working at 12, you never really did stop working, huh?
No, I never had vacations. My typical thing was to get on a bus, go into New York City and work as I got older, from 14 on. Come home, Mom would be there always for me with dinner. I'd then get my gym clothes on, go work out, get ready for football.
Why'd you work so much, and how's that affected you today?
It wasn't forced, and it wasn't something that I forced myself. It was just a natural thing to do. I just felt that was my calling, to be working and to be a leader and to do well for everyone I worked with.
David?
With your 3 children, what did you do differently than maybe your parents did?
One thing we did do, we talked about this the other day, my wife and I, was that we always knew who they were hanging with. We always knew their friends. It's hard to tell them who they can hang with or not, but you had to be involved with their life, and we were.
How'd you teach them the value of hard work?
By example.
Can you share that example?
Every one of my children ended up coming to work with me at some point over some duration on a Saturday. I worked every Saturday for 15 years, and my daughter was there, or my son was there, or my younger son was there. Admittedly, my first 2 children didn't see me a lot, but my 3rd child, my son, who was an avid football player, got me more than they did.
Bob?
Kevin, growing up, what national issue impacted your current business leadership?
9/11 was definitely impactful. I was living in Boston at the time. Watched it on TV. I remember going to my kids' schools and getting them and sitting down and explaining what had happened. It made me actually move from Boston back to South Jersey, where most of our family is.
What made you move from Boston to South Jersey?
Just a sense of, humanity and family. And I was away from my family, other than my immediate family, and actually my wife's family's from South Jersey, so they've become my second family. I knew my wife's dad longer than I knew my own dad. He passed away also. So
the effect of 9/11 is you wanted to be closer to family?
Correct.
And what's that have to do with building a business from $500 million to $2 billion?
I believe if you treat it like a family and you work it that way and you lead by example, people will follow you.
Huh. Okay, because I read stuff about, I thought if you didn't do a good job, you just fire people. You scream and you yell at them.
That's the unfortunate part of my position. I do have to, at times, terminate people from employment, and it brings a tear to my eye at times. It's a job. Someone has to do it. I was out the other night. Someone said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm HR. I'm in HR. I'm a people person."
Frank, what are you thinking?
Kevin, you have a great sense of gratitude, and clearly your father still influences you today. What would you say to him today if you had a chance?
Thank you.
How do you think your father would feel if he knew what you were doing nowadays? If your father walked through the front doors of your office?
My father was a very proud man and didn't really show too much emotion, but he would be...
How do you think he'd feel?
Well, after he passed away, years later, people he worked with came back and told me that he bragged about me all the time, but never to my face. Didn't want me to get full of myself, and I didn't. But to this day, I thank him for that.
So how do you think he'd feel if he knew about the success you were having? From $500 million to $2 billion. Considering he wanted to move from
Brooklyn. There's no words. The type of person he was. Again, I think someone said earlier, wasn't the smartest person in a room with the brightest bulb, but no one really could outwork me. And I think that's how my dad grew up too. So And then my mom was the sensitive one, and she was the one standing in the rain watching football games when my father was working. And that's the memories I have of my parents.
Tell us about your mom. Give me that again.
Well, my mom also was like 4'10", Italian, from Brooklyn, worked as well, kept the family together, was a great cook. My father would typically work all week long, come home on Saturday finally, and then miss a football game. But my mother would be there, on the sideline rooting me on. She was a big football fan, and I played football since I was 5 years old, right through college, and baseball as well. So my mom was there predominantly.
Kevin, you mentioned your son was quite a football player. Did you go to his games?
I was sad to say in the beginning of his college career, I watched him. I coached him through high school, and then he went off to college. The first year he was in East Coast, and I was on the West Coast, but I was traveling back every other week to see him play. And then I made a move from I was an executive at Bank of America. I decided to take a position here on the East Coast, predominantly so I could see my child play football. And be
what did
around
it mean to you to see him have success on the field?
He's my. It's hard to describe. But,
did you ever see him have a bad game?
Oh, absolutely.
What'd you tell him?
You'll do better next time.
How'd you find the time to coach those teams with this busy life?
I made an effort. One thing I did do when I was younger, and my two children all were involved in sports too. My daughter was an avid tennis player. I missed games. When I went to her tennis matches, they threw me out of the matches because I was too loud. My middle son played baseball, and I tried to get there on weekends when I could. But my youngest, when he was born, we had finally made some money. I was a little more successful. We actually got a little help in the family. I'll call it a nanny or an au pair. So it gave me a little more time to spend time with the third
What's the
child.
website address of eMortgage Management?
I'm sorry?
Website address?
EMMloans.com.
We've been speaking with Kevin Crichton, president of eMortgage Management, here on Executive Leaders Radio. We'll be back in a moment, right after this break. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce David Waxman, co-founder and managing partner, MMPartners. David, what is MMPartners?
We're a Philadelphia-based real estate development company focused on adaptive reuse projects. We've developed over 1.5 million square feet of projects and currently have over $250 million of projects in various stages of development.
Wow. And where are you from originally?
Center City, Philadelphia.
Number of brothers and sisters?
One older brother.
And how young were you when you started making money, and with whom?
6 or 7, my brother and I had a car detailing business at the Jersey Shore.
Uh-huh. And tell us what the next step was from that.
My brother and I were always sort of just talking business, scheming, coming up with ideas. Some we'd try, some we wouldn't, but we always just would spend hours on end talking business.
Do you have any partners in the business?
I have 2 partners, Aaron Smith and Joe Zimitor.
How did your brother, and how did scheming with your brother all the time, how did that plant the seeds for your partnership?
It just made me very comfortable having partners and wanting to have partners where you bring different skills to the table that the other person doesn't have.
Give me that again.
Basically, the ability to bring someone who has the yin to your yang and different views on things, and 1 + 1 = 3 is the way I look at the world.
That's what I needed to understand. David?
What was your role in the car detailing business?
I was the wheel guy, so I would clean the wheels and put the armor on.
So what did cleaning the wheels teach you?
Roll my sleeves up and do any job. Nothing's beneath me.
And how does that relate to what your role is today?
Today, if you ask the people that work with me, they'll say, I'm picking up trash at some of our buildings, and I'll do anything. It really doesn't matter. And I expect the same from the people that work for me.
Ethan?
Yeah, what do you mean by that? That you expect the same out of the employees that work for you?
I look at them all as peers rather than subordinates, and if I'm willing to do something, they should be willing to do it. And if I want them to do something, I have to be willing to do it too.
Where does that humility come from, David?
I think just from my parents, from just growing up going to a Quaker school, and just my grandparents, and just being taught that you have to be willing to do anything. That you're not really special, even if you are special.
Drew?
David, you told us at 4 your parents got divorced. I'm just curious what the impact of that divorce was on you.
Yeah, I was obviously very young, and so probably not totally cognizant, but I think in hindsight it taught me that, I had to learn how to serve multiple masters, being, my parents didn't live together, and I had to learn how to deal with both of them separately and please both of them.
And how did learning to serve multiple masters, how does that help you today?
my job is all about managing competing interests and juggling lots of different people and different investors, consultants, etc. So I have to be very diplomatic and able to get things to where I need them to without pissing people off.
David, tell me what it was like growing up in Center City, Philadelphia.
So Center City of the 80s and early 90s was not the Center City, Philadelphia of today. It was kind of gritty and grimy, and I think it taught me how to just, be mindful and protect myself, and also just how to deal with all kinds of different people across the spectrum.
What does that mean, to be mindful?
Just to have empathy for others and understand that people view the world differently, come from different backgrounds, have different things than you do, but treat everyone the same.
And you actually do a lot of rehabbing of the city in what you do now, right?
That's the primary focus of our company.
So that comes out of you're like rebuilding the city you grew up in.
It's pretty gratifying, but yeah, we're changing the physical environment.
What's pretty gratifying?
To be able to leave a mark on a city that I love and change it in a positive way, taking these old, obsolete buildings and turning them into something new, interesting, and cool.
How young were you? How young were you when you realized you wanted to do this kind of stuff?
Very young. One of my dad's patients and oldest friends was a big developer here in Philly. He developed the office building we're sitting in, and I just knew at a young age something about what he did spoke to me, and that I wanted to do that.
How young were you?
I mean, I remember going to his office and seeing models of buildings at 7, 8, 9 years old, and just being like, these are so cool.
What was so cool about that stuff?
It's tangible. You take something, and then there's like the before-after moment. I mean, that for what I do, that's probably one of the most gratifying things. It's simplistic, but to see the before of a building all messed up, and then the after when it's not, it's an amazing thing.
Is it the effect on the people?
I think it's the effect on the people, the city, to be able to solve problems that people say aren't solvable, or to think that, hey, you're crazy to even think you can do this.
How does a building solve a problem? What are you talking about?
Well, a blighted building is not good for the surrounding neighborhood or for the city overall. And if you change it, you improve the overall neighborhood around it and create jobs as well, and you create a place for people to live.
So when you're doing your real estate development, going into some difficult neighborhoods, you're really taking risks.
Yeah, I don't view it as risk per se. I have a very, very healthy appetite for calculated risk.
Huh. Okay.
David, can you tell us a little bit about your mom and what she was like when you were growing
up?
up?
Yeah, she really caring for other people, super organized, and I think that really came through to me and what I do. I tend to be very organized and tend to have a lot of empathy for others.
Empathy for others. What's that have to do with being in the building business and the real estate business? I don't see the connection there.
You have a huge effect on the city and on neighbors and on
Wait a minute.
people's livelihood, and you have to think about that.
Can you feel a neighborhood when you walk down a street, when you drive down a street, when you walk? Can you feel what's going to happen? Can you see what's going to happen in that neighborhood?
I'd like to think so. It's what I studied in school. It's what interests me, and it's what I did in Brewery Town starting in 2001, and sort of single-handedly with my partners redeveloped that neighborhood.
Does that come from your empathy, from your understanding of people and what people like and what people enjoy?
I think it helps. I tend to observe a lot, and just years and years of observing and putting it into practice and testing things, seeing what doesn't work and pivoting from that certainly has been helpful.
So your vision's been honed over the course of a lot of experience, testing stuff, making some mistakes, so you take some risks that don't work out.
All the time, and I'm very comfortable doing that and very comfortable admitting when I'm wrong and pivoting. But if you don't try, you'll never know.
Don't you guys yell at each other and throw things at each other when somebody makes a mistake?
We used to. Now we have a little bit of a more better system for tracking mistakes.
Wanted to make sure I understood, Frank.
So you mentioned you have two business partners. How do you view your role and your interaction with them?
So I tend to want to be at 30,000 feet, very strategic, high level. The push and pull for me and what I work with my coach is staying there and not letting myself get in the weeds, which is not where I belong.
And you clearly care a lot about the community. So personally, what's the most gratifying part of your business?
I think the giving back to the neighborhoods that we build in. So if we're going to make money there, we got to give back. So we do tons of charity work. We coat drives, toys. We painted a gymnasium at a local school. We do mentoring. We take kids on college visiting trips. You name it.
Robert?
Besides your parents, David, who inspired you?
So a patient and best friend of my father's who was a developer really did. My grandmother, who was always had CNBC on TV, got me into business as well. So I'd say those.
Your
those
grandmother had CNBC on?
Yes.
Why was your grandmother watching CNBC?
So my grandfather worked at Johnson & Johnson for his entire life, starting at age 14, and always took stock instead of bonuses, and thankfully left my grandmother in a good situation, and so she was always watching the ticker.
Did you talk to your grandmother about stocks and
Yes.
business and stuff?
Yes.
Your grandmother?
Yes.
And she spent her... what did you learn from your grandmother about business?
Well, she was a bookkeeper as her job, so like everything was organized. She managed the books, and just always said, don't ever sell the Johnson & Johnson stock. Just hold on to it.
So what did that teach you about business?
Take the long view, and be patient, and make good investments that'll pay out over a long period.
What's that have to do with this real estate stuff you're doing?
Well, we tend to go into neighborhoods that, we take the long view, and we're willing to be patient and wait. I mean, I look at this stuff that I'm doing, and I want my kids to own this real estate.
Mm-hmm. Ethan?
David, did I hear you say earlier that you have a coach?
I do.
Don't you know everything already?
No, not even close.
What do you mean?
The way I have gotten to this place is I live the view I can do a couple things very well, and I need to just be doing that over and over and over again, and bringing the people to do the other stuff I don't do well. And so having coaches has helped me get to that sort of understanding, and it's a work in progress still.
And what would you say to your younger self or the younger generation coming up about what that's taught you?
I think you have to be patient. I think you have to take internships and take jobs that maybe aren't glamorous, but you'll learn a lot, and don't expect to get successful overnight. That's a myth. It's made up.
David, you and I spent a lot of time in the same Quaker school growing up. What do you bring from that background that works with you today?
Yeah, I mean, to have gone to a school like Friend Select is, I'm so lucky that I was able to go there. I think it teaches you, again, to care about people, to think about, quote unquote, the community, which is what they called it, and to have empathy, and to learn how to think critically for yourself, and to go left when everyone else goes right.
And how about the silence part? Do you bring silence to your day to day?
I try to. I'm not as adept as that as I'd like to be.
What's the website address for MMPartners?
MMPartnersLLC.com.
Let me have that one more time.
MMPartnersLLC.com.
We've been speaking with David Waxman, co-founder and managing partner of MMPartners here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, that's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, we'll be back in a moment right after this break. Want help building your business with help from this show's CEOs? Our CEOs can help you uncover more opportunities, grow your sales, connect you, help you raise money, all the big issues, because our CEOs have been there and done that. They've succeeded in creating millions of jobs and earning millions of dollars, and some are available to advise you. Now, email mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. That's mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. The same CEOs you've heard on this show for 10 years may be willing to help you build your business, uncover new opportunities, grow your sales, connect you, help you raise money, all the big issues, because our CEOs have been there and done that, succeeding in creating millions of jobs and earning millions of dollars. And some are available to advise you. Now, email mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. That's mentors@executiveleadersradio.com. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Catsy Pemberton, Executive Director, Peters Place. Catsy, what is Peters Place? What are you guys doing?
We are a grieving center for children and families, so we provide a safe and comforting environment for kids both at our center as well as in schools.
Huh. And where are you from originally?
Suburb of Philadelphia.
Uh-huh. How many brothers and sisters?
I'm the youngest of 4.
And didn't you mention something happened with your brother?
Yes, my brother was tragically killed in 2003, leaving a wife and 2 young children.
Uh-huh. How'd that affect you?
It changed my whole horizon completely. He and I were best friends.
Uh-huh. Okay, keep going.
You have to create a new normal. When I first went back to work after he was killed, somebody said, "Great to see you back again. Everything back to normal." So most people in our society and our culture don't like to talk about death and grief.
Somebody said to you, how'd that affect you? Well, we could keep going with that. What do you mean?
You realize that as the grieving person that you end up taking care of those people around you because they have no idea what to say or how to approach you, because it makes death and grief makes people feel very uncomfortable.
So those that are grieving have another burden placed on them.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
Well, when people actually avoid you, some good friends won't call you or visit with you because they don't know what to do. They are so uncomfortable that they become paralyzed.
What's your role in that whole process nowadays?
Our role is to help people understand the effects of death and grief and how to be able to approach people and allow kids to grieve. Kids grieve very differently than adults because their minds aren't developed the same as adults.
Why is it so... Why are you magneted to this? Why is it so attractive to you? Why are you drawn to this?
I'm drawn to it because when my brother was killed in 2003, I had no idea that places like Peter's Place even existed. Unless somebody in your work circle or your social circle knew about a grieving center, it wasn't even something that you would think of to Google.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been so extremely helpful for my sister-in-law and my niece and my nephew.
Mm-hmm. Ethan?
Catsy, tell us a little bit about your mom and dad. What do they do, and are you like your parents?
My dad was a bank executive here in Philadelphia for his whole career, and my mom was a homemaker raising 4 children. And I think if you had to ask me who I was like, I really draw from both of them. My dad was a problem solver and a leader, and I take that from him. My mom was kind of a silent in the background, but very, very impactful. When my mother spoke, people listened.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Catsy, you said you were best friends with your brother. Can you tell us a little about your brother?
My brother was just an amazing person in the sense of he was gregarious, he was happy, a reader, he was a serviceman, he was in the Navy for 23 years. And he and I were just extremely close and very similar. A lot of people thought we were twins, even though we were 7 years apart.
How were you similar?
We could actually finish each other's sentences. We thought the same way. We had the same ethics, the same morals. We believed in the same things.
And when you go to work every day, what do you think your brother's whispering in your ear? What do you hear him saying to you?
That I'm doing the right thing, that I'm in the right place.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
Well, I was in the financial services industry for almost 28 years, and this job opportunity to be executive director of Peter's Place came to me very serendipitously through a friend of mine who's on the board of directors. And interestingly enough, Peter's mother of Peter's Place actually knew my brother, and I didn't know that till after I had been given the job.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
So how did you grieve your brother's passing, and do you still grieve?
You never stop grieving. You process your grief, but you never stop grieving. And it was interesting because I was never a person who liked to ask for help. And when my brother was killed, I said, okay, uncle. And I allowed people to come into my life and help. And it actually really showed me that it's okay to be vulnerable and that vulnerability is actually a strength rather than a weakness.
Wait. Give me that again.
That being able to demonstrate vulnerability is actually a strength rather than a weakness.
Being able to be vulnerable.
Yes.
So our strength lies in our vulnerability?
Correct.
What do you mean?
Being able to ask for help and support and knowing that you can't do everything on your own or by yourself. A lot of people were raised in this culture in our society to be able to say you can do it all on your own, and it's much easier when you have a team of supporters around you helping you, and being able to ask for that help rather than waiting for it to come to you is a strength.
David?
So you answered a little bit of what I was going to ask, but when you made the career change, which is dramatic, what did you bring from your world and your time in finance to the current role? How did that help you?
Actually, I brought my leadership and my managerial skills. That's one of my passions, is to be able to help people become as successful as they can be. And success is defined by that individual person, not by me.
And were you able to be vulnerable in your first part of your career?
I learned, not originally, I will say, not originally. I was in a very male-dominated industry as a woman up and coming, and I made it into senior management, and that took some guts. But again, after my brother was killed, that's when the vulnerability came in.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
Catsy, how young were you when you first started giving back?
I was in high school. There was a program where we could volunteer to tutor inner city kids and help them learn how to read.
And why did you do that?
It was an opportunity for me to see a different side of life and to be able to give back and help somebody be able to achieve something that I had just been given very easily.
And how does that relate to what you're doing at Peter's Place?
A lot of the families that come to Peter's Place or the schools that we go to are people that don't necessarily have a lot of money, and all of our services at Peter's Place are free. And so we're able to give back to the community, not only in helping the families and the children, but also helping provide resources on the understanding of death and grief to the community.
Matthew?
Catsy, take me back to your childhood, youngest of 4 kids. Tell me, what was family life like?
Well, youngest of 4 kids, my parents were kind of tired, and so I really was on my own quite a bit. But I, went to school, played sports, started babysitting probably at the age of 12.
And how does that independence affect who you are today and what you bring to work today?
It's actually enabled me to be independent most of my life and be able to really take care of myself and also sort of pave my own path and be very successful. I have a very strong work ethic.
And I think you said that your childhood, it was a little bit strict in the family too, right?
My father was very, very strict, and so we had chores, and room had to be cleaned. We had to wear shoes at the table. We ate at the dining room table.
So on one hand, you're really good at making sure that the boundaries are followed. On the other hand, you're also comfortable standing your own turf, like doing something like Peter's Place, aren't you?
Yes, and when I went to Peter's Place, it really needed a shift in leadership, and so the first year that I was there, I just sat back and watched and listened. I'm not a social worker by background. I'm the business leader, and so really had to learn about the organization, and there was organic turnover, which was frightening and scary, but necessary.
So you understand your sense of independence as a child, let alone your ability and understanding of the need for structure, really helped you put Peter's Place on the right track.
Exactly.
Why? How?
Coming in and being able to be a confident leader in an organization that had some challenging leadership in the previous years that I was there gave me the ability to sort of take a 30,000 feet view of things and then build it from the ground up.
Where's the money come from for Peter's Place?
It comes from individuals, from foundations, both private and public, and also one large annual fundraiser.
So your part of your gig is raising money, isn't it?
We have to raise approximately 90% of our operating budget every year.
Whose shoulders does that primarily fall on? Isn't that yours?
50% on my shoulders and 50% on my director of development.
Uh-huh. So when you're asking for money, how do you feel about that?
I'm a dog with a bone. I never let go. There's always an opportunity, and I am not afraid to ask, because the only thing that somebody can say to me is no. And I've been asking for money in one way, shape, or form since my first career in the financial services industry.
And you really believe in this mission.
There's no question.
Yeah. Shannon?
Catsy, can you tell us a little bit about your grandmother and what impact she had on you?
My grandmother was in New York City, and during the Depression realized that she had to go to work. And so she hooked up with an owner of an interior design company. What
effect did your grandmother have on you?
She was an independent woman, a business owner. She was the classiest woman I've ever met in my entire life.
What's the website address for Peter's Place?
PetersPlaceOnline.org.
We've been speaking with Catsy Pemberton, Executive Director of Peter's Place here on Executive Leaders Radio. Ethan, could you give us a rundown on who else we've had the opportunity of hanging out with today?
Sure, Herb, and we'd like to thank the law office of Obermeyer for hosting us again today. We had a great show with Mike Harle, President of Gaudenzia, Kevin Crichton, President of eMortgage Management, David Waxman, Co-founder and Managing Partner, MMPartners, and Catsy Pemberton, Executive Director, Peter's Place.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Drew Hanlon, Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, Bob Carullo, Sabre Systems, Ethan Milrod, GoTo, David Stefano, Exude, and Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning, for giving me hand structure in the questions. Hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for joining us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.